South Carolina going on the road to take on the Tennessee Vols, man. You know, last year when these two teams faced off, the Beamer boys, they broke Tennessee, man. Let's just call it what it was. I mean, you had Hendon Hooker. Let's just rewind the clock back to last year. For those of you guys that don't know what South Carolina did to Tennessee the night that they destroyed the Vols and broke their souls, let me give you a quick synopsis of what happened. So Tennessee was going into that game, you know, unbeaten, with a great chance of having Hendon Hooker, their starting quarterback at the time, being able to win the Heisman Trophy and potentially leading them to the college football playoffs despite their loss to Georgia. And then South Carolina, they injure Hendon Hooker. They keep him from being a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, and they keep him from being a Heisman finalist. And then not just do they end Hendon Hooker's season, but they end Tennessee's playoff hopes, beating the Vols. Spencer Rattler ran off. He had 6 touchdowns in this game. So for Tennessee, you got to think that this game has to mean a lot more for them, because they got to have a really bitter taste in their mouth for what South Carolina and the Beamer boys did to them last year. And it's funny because people were overlooking South Carolina going into this game last year. And one thing that you got to know, anytime you play South Carolina, you cannot overlook this team. This is one of these teams that anytime they're playing great competition, they play up to their level of competition. You know that anytime South Carolina is going up against a good team, they're going to give it their all. Shane Beamer, I don't know what the hell this dude tells his team before he games, but he just has a really unique ability of having his team ready to play against some of the best teams in the SEC. And you look at Tennessee, you know, they beat UTSA last week, but they lost to Florida not too long ago when they got held to 16 points. Now, luckily enough, you're not going up against a defense that's as good as Florida. As a matter of fact, South Carolina's defense, minus, you know, what they did against Georgia, hasn't really looked that good. And I wonder how their secondary is going to be able to hold up against this passing attack of Tennessee, because you know Joe Milton has the world's strongest arm, right? I think that Joe Milton may have the strongest arm in the history of football, not just American football, but Canadian football, Arena Football League. You name any quarterback that had a strong arm in the past, I think Joe Milton has a stronger arm than them. Joe Milton makes this Tennessee offense even more deadly this season than what it was with Hendon Hooker. If you want to beat Tennessee, you got to be able to slow that offense down, and you got to make sure that you limit the amount of big plays that they're able to generate. You got to be able to keep everything in front of you. Now, for South Carolina, defensively, let's say that you're able to slow down Tennessee's offense, right? Well, what is your offense going to be able to do? Now, your offense, you know, they didn't look good against North Carolina. Now, against Georgia, you look better, and you did look good last week against Mississippi State, where Spencer Rattler, only had 2 incompletions in that game. But he also got sacked a lot of times in that game. He got sacked 4 times against Mississippi State last week. He got sacked 3 times against Georgia, and he got sacked 9 times against North Carolina. Going up against Tennessee, you're not going to be able to beat this team if you can't give Spencer Rattler time to throw the football. So if South Carolina is going to be able to go toe-to-toe and point for point with Tennessee offensively, they're going to need to give Spencer Rattler time to survey the field and throw the football. Spencer Rattler, he should have a really nice game. He's played some really good football outside of one off performance against Georgia. He's looked pretty good against Mississippi State. He went 18 of 20. He threw for 288 yards, had 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. And we got to remember, the Rattler struck last year when the Vols played against South Carolina. He put up 6 touchdowns on this defense. And Tennessee fans know what Spencer Rattler is capable of being able to do when he's clicking on all cylinders. So if Spencer Rattler gets hot, and let's say he's going into the second quarter and he has 1 or 2 touchdowns under his belt, this could be a ball game where we see both of these 2 teams going back-to-back when it comes to putting points on the scoreboard. The scoreboard may forever keep blinking in this game. What really surprises me is Tennessee being a 12.5-point favorite, though. You know, like, I don't think Tennessee is as dominant as a team this year like they were last year in 2022. Now, this game is probably going to prove that theory to be either true or false, but Tennessee against Florida, I mean, they really couldn't do anything offensively. They got dominated up front. And South Carolina, their offensive line has some concerns, but Tennessee, you're still wondering how their offensive line is going to look because against Florida, they got manhandled up front by the Gators' defensive line. Is South Carolina going to be able to replicate that same winning formula? Now, the good thing about Tennessee is that your run defense got gashed by Florida. South Carolina, rushing attack, don't even ask about it because they don't know what that is. The only way South Carolina can win this game is if Spencer Rattler goes off. They can't run the football. They don't really have the kind of defense that's going to be able to allow this offense to buy time to get into a rhythm, because sometimes you can have an offense that struggles, but when you have a great defense, it can give your offense time to get things going. But if Tennessee starts this game out fast, and let's say Tennessee gets out to a 24-3 lead early, midway through the second quarter, I think this game is all but over. Because by that point, we will already have a good understanding of if South Carolina is going to be able to have success offensively. And if South Carolina gets going early, then they're really hard to stop. But if this offense struggles out the gate, then I don't think they're going to be able to come back from behind against a Tennessee offense that can score at will. And maybe South Carolina's defense can get a stop here or two, but Tennessee's defense isn't as bad as what many people think. People tend to forget that although this defense did have a couple of odd performances, they blew out Kentucky and LSU on the road in Death Valley. So this defense is capable of being able to get a couple of key stops. And against a South Carolina offense that is giving up 9, 4, and 3 sacks against Power 5 opponents, you like Tennessee's chances in this game up front versus when they were going up against the Florida Gators. And the Florida Gators were a team that is really physical. They were able to run the football. They were able to play complementary football. South Carolina doesn't have that same luxury. Now, Spencer Sanders, or I don't know why I keep calling this man Spencer Sanders. If Spencer Rattler can have another great game like how he did last week against Mississippi State, South Carolina has a good chance of being able to win. But Tennessee, I think they most likely should win this game. It could be close, but at the same time, like, South Carolina's offensive line is just so bad, and it's been bad for going on, this is like the 3rd straight season that South Carolina has had a garbage offensive line, and I don't really know how much offense they can be able to sustain with an offensive line that's given up 4 or 5 sacks. Now, South Carolina, they can generate big plays. You know, they could easily be in a 3rd and long situation and convert that. And they can easily get like 40, 50-yard big play touchdowns via the vertical passing game. But the offensive line has to be able to give Spencer Sanders a little bit of time. If I'm the defensive coordinator for Tennessee, I'm sending pressure all game. Make that offensive line have to pick up additional guys, have to account for extra blitzers, because I don't think they're capable of being able to do it. I mean, North Carolina had 9 sacks. 9 sacks, North Carolina. I mean, I don't know, man, but if South Carolina's offensive line can play better in this game than what they have had up to this point this season, they got a shot at being able to beat Tennessee. But I don't know if South Carolina is capable of being able to hang point for point with Tennessee this year. Last year, it just was the perfect storm. You kind of caught them napping. And then when Hendon Hooker got injured, they kind of lost their spirit. You kind of took the soul of their football team away. You took the heart and soul away from Tennessee. You're going up against a Tennessee team that remembers everything that happened last year. And you definitely can count on this team being extremely motivated to play in this game. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee covers, but I'm picking Tennessee to win outright. But I think South Carolina can keep this thing close. Even if their offensive line plays like garbage, like I do think that with Spencer Rattler at quarterback, they're good for a couple of solid drives and a couple of big play touchdowns.